Quick bit of introduction first of all. So my name's Tim Cooper. In my day job, I'm the chair of the West Midlands Imaging Network, and I'm also vice chair of the NICE Quality Standards Advisory Committee, lovingly called QSAC 3. But previously I was head of hospital inspection for CQC for quite a number of years, and also director of a quality review service that was both national and international peer review and setting quality standards. So I've been doing peer review for about 20 years now, and what I'm doing now is trying to bring some of that learning, some of that thought to you. That helps you with planning your peer review and peer review processes. Right, so I've read the book on teaching grandmother to suck eggs. It's a good read, but that's not what we're trying to do today. I think many of you have learned the skills and got the skills that you need to do peer review from your professional life and your day jobs. What I'm hoping to be able to do is to give you a vessel to be able to put that in and a structure to be able to use it. So when you approach peer review, you take the skills that you've already learned and you bring them together to the fore to be able to help you understand what it is that you need to do and give you the confidence to be able to use the skills that you've already got. There are a number of different models that you can use for peer review, and it's important at this stage just to reflect on those so we understand why we're doing the model that we're doing. The first one is where you appoint a peer review team and they go around to all 11 services around the Midlands and do the review programme. That's incredibly onerous for one group of people. It assumes you get a good team to start with and everybody works well together, and you can't take much of the learning out until you get to the end of the programme, till you've seen all 11. So it kind of works, but it's a big ask for one individual set of people. The other model is Team A reviews Team B and Team B reviews Team A, and likewise. There's real risk of reciprocal bias, because if I'm reviewing you today and you're reviewing me next week, I'm more likely to be gentle with you this week in the hope that you'll do the same for me next week. So you do get that built-in bias that doesn't really work well, and again, you don't get the learning till it's all over. The model that we prefer is what we call the daisy chain model, and where Team A reviews Team B. At the end of that review, both sets of teams have got a double set of learning from each other. So both learn from each other. They've both got some good practice and some ideas for improvement from each other. By the time Team B goes to review Team C, they're taking the knowledge of Team A and Team B into that review with Team C. By the time you get to Team G, you've got 7 lots of learning in people's heads in the review programme, and you've already shared that learning with 6 or 7 teams before you get there. So this is the best way of doing a review programme, and it's the best way of sharing that learning, and mixing up the teams as you go means that learning gets shared out very, very quickly across the whole patch. Just to be very clear that peer review is not audit. Audit is a very insular process. It's a pass or a fail. It's a tick box approach. Often can be done as a desktop process. As long as you've got the audit questions right, then audit is a simple process. This is about that dialogue with clinicians, about the understanding of the why. It's about your professional interpretation of the way their service is provided. But it is an opportunity to think about high quality practice and about how you share that learning and how you share that improvement. And the people who may be struggling more than others get that opportunity for that supportive learning in a developmental environment that allows them to grow and flourish. So this is an overused meme, and I make no apologies for it, because it talks to the heart of why we really go through peer review programs. Because quality is about the way things we do around here. It's not what we do on the day of the visit. It's the way we always do things around here. It's where the teams have got quality as their ethos and getting it right as their ethos and learning from the programme that they do. Giving some consideration to the group agreement during the review programmes. We talked earlier on about valuing everybody's contribution, and I make no apologies for putting this in again. Everybody's got equal value. When you look at CQC and they take their specialist advisors on a review programme, and they pay their specialist advisors, and it's helpful to reflect that here, their surgeons on the review programme are paid exactly the same amount as the student nurses who go on peer review programmes. And it's because it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you get paid in your day job, you've got an equal value and an equal role to play in the team, and it levels everything out very clearly. There's an enormous amount of learning to take from this review program for everybody to take away into their own personal and professional practice. You need to take responsibility for that. You need to see those opportunities as you're going around. If you see something that you think is good for you, I think the team you're reviewing would be very proud if you said, can I borrow a copy of that? Because that's really helpful for me to take back. So make time for your own learning. In the program you develop, there are no spare slots. There is no spare half an hour to play catch up. So you constantly need to keep an eye on timekeeping. You constantly need to make sure that you're watching out for losing time and make sure you're keeping up to scratch with that. You will be looking at patient information, and therefore you need to think about confidentiality. Make sure your notes don't reflect patient information. And we'll talk about looking at records later on. But we also need to think about the Chatham House Rule. Now, Chatham House Rule started out at the Royal Institute of International Affairs and is often misquoted and often misunderstood. So just for clarity, it's not Chatham House Rules. Everybody thinks it's Chatham House Rules, and it's not. There's only one rule. And everybody thinks it's about confidentiality, and it's not, because if this review is confidential, you wouldn't be able to take any learning away from it at all. It's about non-attributability. So when you walk out of this review program, you can free to talk about whatever you've learned and whatever you've got and share that learning with other people, as long as you don't refer back to the individual clinicians or make it identifiable in any way. And that allows people to be confident in having conversations with you that actually they won't be identified in the things that they're saying to you. So the ultimate purpose of peer review is to ensure that services are as safe as possible. That's the primary function of what we're trying to get to. But in ensuring that they're safe, it also is about improving the quality and the effectiveness of care. So this is a journey of improvement, not just a here and now, but it's where the service is going on its journey. And if we get that right, we will therefore ultimately improve the patient and carer experience in the way that we provide care. Your role is to be independent and fair, so that you're looking at the service through open eyes and taking that development and learning approach, and to encourage people to share good practice. And one of the real dangers of any review program is that the team will be very nervous about you coming in. And you get that rabbit in the headlights bit, don't you? You know, the review team is here today. Oh my God, what are they looking for? And therefore that ability to allow them to reflect that good practice, that ability to encourage them to say what they're proud of, and we'll cover that later on, is a great opportunity for you and others to take away what's done. And in my experience, even in the hospitals that I've put into special measures, even some of those hospitals that are struggling badly have got some good things that they're doing that is hidden away amongst everything else. So even if you find a team that's struggling, you'll still find things that they're doing well and good practice that they've got. So in my previous organisation, we were the first team to find the problems going off at mid-staff. So we're the first team to be able to identify it through a review that we did of their A&E service. And this was the closing statement that was put into the public inquiry for mid-staffs. And highlight the bits in the middle that said single day's visit by volunteers. And that's you in this case, you're the volunteers to a service, provided a very clear account of the risk posed by the trust A&E, which otherwise seemed to have escaped all the other scrutiny until the arrival of that team. And it says that peer review would be a much more efficient way of identifying the risks than, for example, what was happening in Healthcare Commission and the NHSLA at the time. And this is why the new model in 2014 adopted by CQC was very much one more based around peer review than anything else. And so much so that when Robert Francis wrote the executive summary for the mid-staffs report, he wrote this. Please don't read it. It's motherhood and apple pie. A lot of it is about warm stuff that makes you feel fluffy inside. It's this bit in the middle that's the really important part of what Robert Francis wrote. If I paraphrase it for you, what it says is, if you've got clinicians who are performing badly, peer review is not the best tool in the toolbox to be able to do that. You've got better tools to help people who are performing badly. Peer review's real opportunity is for people who are doing good, who want to get better, or people who are struggling and need some help to improve. And that's the real strength of peer review, is that ability to help people on that improvement journey by colleagues who understand what it is they're doing and what they're going through. So I just take a quick pause at that point as we've got through there. Are there any questions, any thoughts at this stage before we carry on?
Please do use the chat box if it's if
Zahira,
you feel like
Zahira
you
will
want
monitor
to.
that on our behalf.
I'll monitor it.
Yeah. So everybody happy so far?
If I could just say, Tim, I am actually very happy because I wasn't able to attend. Sorry for interrupting. I didn't put my hand up. Apologies. I need to use the hand button. Big
No worries,
apologies.
Julie.
It's fine, Julie.
It's fine.
But I wasn't able to attend Monday's meeting, and I know that you've sent me the slides to here, so thank you, and I will review those. But of course, I was a little bit concerned coming into this after reading all of the documents, and you've actually put my mind at ease, Tim. So thank you. And it's only been the first few minutes, so many thanks.
So we will
to
do.
you.
Yeah, we will do much more of that, Julie. So it's great. Sarah, sorry, you were going to come in. Do you? Okay.
I was going to say something almost along the same lines, really, that I think what's really great is what all of this is underpinning the process that we're hoping to take forward. So I'm not struggling to keep up, but there's an awful lot to take on board.
There's a significant amount. Yeah, no, absolutely.
So are these slides are being shared, aren't they? You
will get these slides at the end of today, absolutely. Yeah. And just as a commitment, because I think it goes to what you just said, Sarah and Julie, we're not then doing this training and then just throwing you to the wolves and say get on with it. You know, we're here to be able to provide that. If the stuff you go, I didn't quite understand that, and I just want to go back, just give me a call. That's what we're here for.
Right. And we all
and that goes. Sorry, Sarah.
So I was just sorry to hear. I was just going to say we all get access to the recording as well, don't we?
Yes, if you're on the invite to here, it should stay in your chat. I don't know how long it stays on your chat, but you should be able to play it back over the next couple of days at least. Yeah, it's normally there for a good month, I think. So you see, by the time you go on, yeah.
And also upload it to the NHS Futures platform that I've given access to everybody. So you should find the training as well as the briefing, slides and recording on there.
Excellent. Right. So let's pick up then where we left. I don't know whether I can. There it is. Right. Just checking we're all back online. You've got that again. Fantastic. Okay. Right. So every time I go back in, it doesn't want to go. Click on. Okay. Right. Given the fact that we've got a terminology concept of we don't have national standards for long COVID in the same way that you might have for many services, and we'll come on to terminology a little bit later on when we come to writing the report bits. Just thinking about quality standards or quality measures, they have to do a number of things if we get them right. So the first thing is that they need to summarise existing guidance. So they shouldn't be one individual's view of where the service should be run, but actually should be a culmination of professional thought, professional deliberation, and clinicians coming together to say, this is the guidance we want the service to follow. They should cover both structure and process. So they should be able to describe the way the service is set up and the way the service is delivered. So they're not just about one element of the service, but they should cover the whole of the service. Quality standards or quality measures should also be used and suitable for use in peer review. And what I mean by that is that as a reviewer, you should be able to take the measure that you've got in the document and understand what it is you're measuring. And you should be able to look at it and say, can I check that the service is meeting this in the way that they think they're meeting? And is there enough substance in there for me to be able to check the measurement? And finally, therefore, if we get all of that right, they should be able to be used in future service specifications. And in my previous work with the Quality Review Service, a number of our quality standards found their way into commissioning service specifications in services that, very much like long COVID, don't have that wider profile. Sorry, I was trying to lost the word then. That sort of wider profile. And therefore, commissioners say those standards, those measures are really good for our service specification because we know how they're being applied across the country. So getting these measures right and getting the approach to peer review right should think about the whole service and should be used then to commission the service in the future. And if quality standards are right, they should cover the whole balance, both from the patient experience, the patient understanding, the patient information element of the service, all the way through to the ability to measure clinical outcomes. So this is one where there's a bit of thinking for you over the next couple of days, not today, but what you should do is think, if I walked into your service today and national guidance had been implemented, I will see. And I want you to give some thought to that over the next week or so. I put some touchstones down in your mind. So you might want to think about patient pathways. You might want to think about common pathways. You might want to think about audits of outcomes. You might want to think about good patient information. But it's important you think about that now, because when you get on the review, and the review is really busy and your mind is really distracted on a whole load of things, and when your head is overloaded for information and you can't see the wood from the trees, you're going to need to go back to the things you said, this is what I expected to see when I walked into this service, to use that as a touchstone to go back to. So just give some thought about things you expected to see in the service before you go in. That'll just help you thinking about what you do. So let's turn now to the visit programme itself. Let's talk about what the visits will look like. So just principles of the visits, first of all, need to be open, they need to be fair, they need to be consistent. Overall, we're reviewing 11 services, so we need to get through all 11 and be able to look back and say, we did them all in the same way. They'll all have nuance difference because all the services are slightly different, but we need to be able to look back and say, were we fair and consistent all the way through? And therefore, can we take a view across the Midlands about the way that long COVID services are being provided? We really want to get the good practice out of here to help learning. The whole idea of this is that in the government's terminology of today, it's about levelling up. So it's about getting everybody to a higher standard by the end of the programme. You only do that by taking the good practice out and sharing the good practice. Everybody's got an equal contribution to make. We've said that several times, but I'd make no apologies for repeating it. And this is about the patient's journey. This is about the patient going through the service. This is not about individual clinician's practice. This is not about one element. This is about how the service works for each patient and the view that they get. And the focus should be from the teams who are being reviewed, and also from you doing the review, is how can we improve, not look how good we are. If the focus of the team is look how good we are, then they're missing the point about an improvement journey. And in CQC terminology, any service that's outstanding, if it does nothing over the next year, will only be good next year because everybody will catch up. If it does nothing after that, it requires improvement the year afterwards because everybody's overtaken it. So this is a constant improvement journey for all organisations. The visiting team that you take, and it may be virtual, so visiting team is a loose terminology. Just to be clear, is not all disciplines. You may not take everybody with you to cover every single discipline, and you'll make up that team depending on the host team that you go into. You'll make it up as the best fit for the host team that you go into without overloading them with lots of people through the door. Everybody will have been trained, so you will know exactly what you're doing and you will work together as a team. But importantly then, because it may not be all disciplines, you're all acting on behalf of the wider health community. So this isn't about the medic reviewing the medical parts of the practice and the nurses reviewing the nursing part of the practice and the patient representative looking at patient issues. It's very much about everybody looking at everything. Clearly, you're there as a lead on behalf of one part. But if you happen to be in a conversation with a patient and you're the nurse, then you should be thinking about the patient experience as well as thinking about the nursing elements. You should be thinking about the whole gamut of what the team is there to do. So your responsibilities as a reviewer, and it's important to cover these off so you know what it is you've got to do. First of all, to read the information pack you've been sent in advance. The team have put a lot of effort into writing that to be able to give you a grounding in their service. You ought to have read it and understood what that tells you about the service you're going to. You need to be familiar with the process, the quality standards or the quality measures and the review questions that you're going to be asking. And those are in the pack that you've been sent. Those are the information that Sahira gave on Monday. But also some of that is part of the training that we're going to go through today. Your responsibilities are to review. Now, I'm terming it compliance with the quality standards. We'll talk about this later on, but it's about whether people are meeting the measures or whether they're not. To identify the practice and worthy note. Now, that could be either exemplar, you are doing this really well, you should be really proud of what you're achieving, or this service is struggling really badly for staffing or whatever you might want to say, and in those challenging conditions, you're still doing a good job. So it doesn't matter how you describe it, you will see things that people are doing really well. You need to think about how you identify issues related to the quality standards, to the measures where people are not doing well, and how you feed that back is really important. And we'll talk about the language we use later on. We're talking about keeping the timetable earlier on, but it is busy, so you need to think about that. The confidentiality and the sensitivity of the information you've got and how you use that, and your impartial nature to make sure you're being fair with them. Now, Zahira talked on Monday about the roles of individuals, and I'm not going to go through that. This is 3 of her slides put together on one page. I just want to make sure that people have had the opportunity to review those and are comfortable with what this says about their responsibilities. And if not, then we will need to go back and look at these later on, and maybe we can work one-on-one with people who still don't understand what it is that they're being asked to do. But hopefully by the time the training session's over, you'll feel very comfortable with doing that. You will have been sent an information pack ahead of the visit, and it may not be in one pack, it may be in little bits and pieces, but you should have directions of where to go, and don't wait till the morning to realise you don't know where you're going or what you're doing if you're going there in person. You should have an emergency contact number. So if you wake up in the morning, you're not feeling very well, you're not able to take part in the review, you should know who you're going to call and who you're going to say, sorry, I really can't be there. You should know who it is that you're going with and the different roles for the people, so you feel comfortable in the team that you're working with. You should have had a timetable for the things that are happening over the day or the days ahead. You should have had the background report. We talked about this on the last slide, but you should have a view of what the service is doing, and their self-assessment and some evidence about where they think they are meeting the individual measures and where they're not. The challenge we've got with this review programme is that some of the services are set up differently to each other. Some of the services are more virtual, some of the services are working in different ways. So what we've done with the training programme here is set up the traditional method of peer review done on one day on site. So traditionally, you go on site one day, you do the review in one day, in person, face to face with people. Some of your visits are going to be virtual. Some of your visits are going to be on more than one day. They're going to be spread across the week. Not everybody may take part in every one of the conversations. What we're doing is describing the traditional model so you can see the whole in one go. You will then need to take out the elements of those and adapt them and tweak them and turn them around a little bit so they fit the model that you're using. So it's all in here. You should be able to take it out quite comfortably and quite easily and see what it is that you need to be doing. So on the traditional one-day model, this is the indicative programme. This is what the programme looks like on day one. At some point, you need to introduce yourself to the team and say hello to the people you're meeting. They need to know you, but you need to say hello to the people who you're reviewing with. So you, as a team, you feel comfortable. Whilst you've got the background report, it's often helpful to ask the service to give you a short presentation about the service that they're providing. That's really important because it helps set the scene and it starts that dialogue between you and the team. There's an opportunity for Q&A, but I'd encourage you not to start to do the interviews on the back of that presentation. Keep your questions to factual accuracy about the presentation and understanding. If you start the interviews on the back of the service presentation, you can't then go back and re-ask the questions a second time, but you may not have done it properly then. That you then have the opportunity to look at the evidence to see what the service say is the evidence they're providing to show they're meeting some of the quality measures. And we'll talk about how you look at that in a minute. If you're doing it in person, it's really good to go and look at the patient pathway, look at the facilities, walk the patient's journey. If you do that, I would encourage you, when you're taking your patient service reviewer with you, to watch out for them very carefully. Sorry, Sarah, but this is the time when we tend to lose you on these views, because the opportunity, is to look at patient information, the way it's displayed, the way it's portrayed, and if you're not careful, the team has moved on to the next part of the tour of the facilities, and you're still looking at the information on the board. So if you're doing it in person, please keep an eye out for the person who's leading on patient experience to be able to make sure that they're still with you along the way. Then there's a set of meetings before and after lunch, and lunch is a really important part. I know getting fed is important, but it's that opportunity for you to come back from the first set of meetings and say to everybody else, I've spoken to the medical director and he said this. When you go and speak to the doctor on duty, please check their understanding is exactly the same, because it didn't seem to correlate well with what we've heard so far. So it's your chance to share with other people the questions that you would ask in their meeting if they were there, and chance to just start to really get a view. When you've had the second set of meetings, we tend to bring people back to start to draw conclusions, and it's very easy to get caught up in one little bit, but so whoever's leading on this needs to help keep people focused on that part. When you've drawn conclusions, the feedback is important, and we'll talk in a minute about how you give feedback and the language you use and the way that you do it. And you need to keep an eye on the time, because these people who you're doing the review with have all started out really early in the day. Even the host team have had an early start. They'll be absolutely shattered by the end of the day. So you need to be very conscious of people starting to sort of fade a little bit by the time you get to 4:30, 4:45. That first hour of the review, particularly when you're on site, is really vital. It's getting a feel for the evidence. It's establishing whether you think the measures are being met, and using what's in the evidence to help inform the questions that you might want to ask as you go through. You need to think about concentrating on the main areas, not getting caught up in sort of cul-de-sacs and little sideshows. And what you will tend to find is that they will provide you with an awful lot of evidence for some services. And this is exactly what we found in one service. You can see here in the picture we've got at the bottom right. We walked into one service and there were 5 big A4 binder folders full of evidence. There's no way you can read that in an hour. So you need to look to see whether the measure is met. You don't need to read every word of the evidence they provided you. Just for clarity, if we're looking at case notes, if we're looking at patient information, that's for NHS reviews only, because you've signed a confidentiality agreement in your contract of employment. So only if you're an NHS reviewer do you look at patient case notes. We've asked the service to get agreement from their Etiquette guardian. Whether they've done that, I don't know. So you need to just make sure that you've got agreement to do that. If you do make any notes, please don't put anything of patient identifiable data in there. Too very generic. Think about the concept rather than the individual patient journey themselves. When you're looking at the evidence, think about the smaller amounts of evidence. Start to look at the headline stuff first of all. That will help you think about what you're going to be looking at. There'll be a wide range of evidence available, and it'll be in lots of different formats. If you're doing it virtually, it might be more difficult for you to see, because some of it could be on their hospital systems. So when you're doing the planning beforehand, talk to them if it's virtually about how you're going to manage to see some of that evidence and how they're going to be able to send you the evidence to show that they're meeting some of the quality measures. All we're asking of the service is not the kitchen sink methodology. Please don't say it's in there somewhere, we gave it to you, because you haven't got a hope in one day of being able to get to the bottom of that. So you need to think about how you're going to manage to see all that information and work your way through it. The pathway presentation that the service may want to give you, just thinking about what that might look like. We think a maximum of 15 minutes. It's not about chapter and verse. It's just to give you a feel for the service. It's just to give you an idea of where they're coming from, what they're doing now, what they think of the obstacles in developing the service, where their vision for taking the service is, and a general opportunity for you to get that final feel for the way the service works. Everybody's service is different, everybody's service is structured differently, and you will want to make sure that you are also managing to understand that service before you begin. Like we said earlier on, avoid the detail of the individual interviews. If you start to get in those individual questions at this point, you'll never get out of that meeting, and you'll waste the whole day in having those conversations. So again, let's just take a quick pause from there, just to make sure everybody's comfortable with where we are at the moment. Any particular questions find it easier to do it in chunks and let people bubble away with the things that are in their head. Otherwise, if you get to the end, you've lost the first bit. So everybody happy? Okay, right, in which case, let's go back to where we were, and there it was. Right, so now comes the thing about the structure and process that we're going to go through. So when we're thinking about the meetings that we've got, there's some basic premises about the meeting and the organisation and the meeting etiquette, which we'll cover on the next couple of slides. The first thing you need to think about is making sure that everybody is introduced, and it's easy to say, and it feels fairly obvious to say, but particularly virtually, you can sometimes find that people get missed out because they're sat in the corner. And try to put everybody at their ease. This is a supportive review. This is supposed to be sort of friendly help to help the service grow, but they're naturally going to be nervous because you're coming in to review what they're doing and the way their service is working. So it's often easy to start with some comfortable questions that allow you to develop a rapport with people. Make sure everybody's clear about why you're there. Not every team is good at communicating the review and the review process, and some senior people think they know what it is, but other people don't. So just make sure everybody knows the purpose and structure and what you're going to be doing during that meeting. Keeping the records of the conversation is really important. So make sure people know that you're going to be taking notes, but importantly, make sure they know that while you're taking notes, you're not looking at them, you're not making eye contact, so that when you're looking down, it's not that you're not looking at them, you're just looking down because you're making good and accurate notes. Start off with some open questions to allow them to talk and to allow them to get their story out. We've all got used to virtual meetings. It's what we do. It's what we're doing today. It's the way that the world is, and we think we know how to work meetings. But just to be clear, for these virtual reviews, make sure we attend at start on time. It's really important that people are there right at the start of the meeting. It's really important that everybody turns up right at the start. And if you're the lead for that meeting, take control. Make sure that you own that meeting and you take control of the conversation, because otherwise it'll drift and everybody else will be sort of talking over each other. If you're in a virtual meeting and you're meeting somebody and they got 2 or 3 people in the room, not everybody will be on the same camera, not everybody will be able to be seen. So make sure you know who's in the room and make sure you can see everybody if you can. It's helpful if people are talking that you can see them, so encourage them to come in the camera's vision if they're not visible when they're talking. But the real challenge about virtual meetings that we all find is that the non-verbal cues are less easy to see. So on a regular basis, you'll need to stop and to summarize, just give people the chance to be able to show where they're at. It's really easy for people to talk over each other. It's really easy for people to do that. So you might want to encourage people to use the raised hand function. But if people don't, and if people have got a view, then it's really important that you encourage them to come into that conversation. And you need to think about how you're going to bring others into the conversation, some people who may not have spoken. And one of the easy ways is to be very direct and say, here's a question for Mary or Fred or whoever hasn't spoken, so that you actually encourage them to respond to the individual question. And that's an opportunity to ensure that everybody's had a view. And sometimes it's important because the quiet ones are maybe the ones who probably got something that you need to hear, but they're not willing in the team or don't feel able in the team to be able to put themselves forwards. So we don't regularly put additional slides in for those who are looking at the patient experience part of the program, but we put this one slide in importantly because there's that little bit, and Sarah, this is talking directly to you at the moment, but this is the bit where in the patient and carer meetings, you need to think slightly differently about the format and the way that you approach these meetings. So whilst the professionals may understand the role of peer review, the patients may not entirely. So you may need to sit down for a few minutes and just explain to them the purpose of the meeting so they understand. They need to understand that this isn't about their individual experiences. You're there to listen, but you can't interject on their behalf about their individual treatment pathway, their individual care plan. You're there to listen about their experiences of service, not to comment on it. They need to understand that the information is in confidence. We will never make reference to them. And whilst we talk about the non-attributability bit about the service, we should be even more careful about the non-attributability bit about patients, because in much smaller numbers of people who turned up for the interview, they still might feel they can be identified. So however we're reflecting patient comments, we need to think very differently about how we make sure that patients don't feel that it in any way points to them. There is a challenge that the NHS finds, that most patients don't understand the boundaries of each different service. So patients will see their diagnosis of long COVID and start to think about their original diagnosis and their experience in hospital somewhere, their experience with their GP, then in the long COVID service and all the other things that are happening. So you need to make sure that this is framed around this service and the service they're in at the moment, not the experiences they had elsewhere. They could talk about those if they want to, but that's not what this review is about. And really importantly, and we'll cover this on a slide later on as well, but if you're worried about what you've heard and somebody's told you something that really bothers you, talk to somebody as soon as you can so that you share that information. And somebody will either say, yes, you should be worried, or no, you're not. But actually, it's really important, if patients have told you something that worries you about the quality of their care, you should be able to share that with somebody and allow that to be offloaded somewhere else. Tracy.
Sorry, we're just wondering how many patients and carers would you want us to speak to? You know, just so that we could. Do you have a set amount?
No, there isn't. I've done it with 2. I've done it with 22, and some of it is you should offer the opportunity to patients on the day that the service is being reviewed.
Okay.
And you should offer the opportunity, and if it's an on-site review in person, you'll need to think about how you can change their appointment times so that their care program is done while they're there for the meeting, not have to come back at some later date and come back at their normal appointment times. Normally 3, 4, 5 is good. I would encourage you not to handpick them and pick your favourite patients who are likely to give, but you know, the people who actually want to have a say. So you know, number to suit really.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay.
Tracy, and just to kind of interject there, you might want to undertake some of these interviews, meetings individually or as a group if you find that it's more useful and it you know, helps you with time and things like that. So we've got both options.
Yeah, the challenge I think is to think about managing people's times as well. And oftentimes 2 or 3 patients together in the same room bounce off each other and help grow the story. So, Sarah, you're going to come in there, and I think you disappeared off my screen.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. No, about so at the moment, we've been on a call for nearly 50 minutes, and I'm feeling quite exhausted at the moment, just in terms of me interviewing, working with patients. I'm hoping they won't be one after the other. I'm hoping there'll be gaps between them.
And I'm hoping that somebody will come with you when you do those reviews. I'm hoping you won't do them on your own. So it would be helpful if somebody was with you to provide you some support and either take some notes for you or whatever. But yeah, they should be separated out so that you do one and then you reflect on what you've heard and do another one. And if they're all together, do it in one go, and that's even better still.
And Sarah, we've kind of we put a time frame on it. I think patient interviews would probably take approximately up to 30 minutes, if that. So they're fairly short, concise, things like that.
And my understanding, thanks, and my understanding is that all mine are online. That's my understanding. Is that?
I think so for this part of the review program. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Right, so just thinking about questioning and how we approach questions. There are a number of ways that you can phrase things, and as I say, it's not what you say, it's the way that you say it. So open questions are really good. It encourages people to talk. So the why, what, where, when, how type of questions encourages people to expand on what they're saying, and you find it helpful. It brings out lots of information. Closed questions are also really helpful, but they're very much more about checking the facts. So they're very much more about ensuring that you've understood what they've told you and that you're looking for a yes or a no or a number. Hypothetical questions that test the contingencies, the what if ones. Has this service thought about the curved ball? What happens if too many referrals come or whatever else? Have they thought about the things that could happen and testing whether their thought processes are sensible, logical and appropriate? The probing questions are the one where when you want to get integrated depth into something, the probing questions are helpful to unpick some of that. The leading questions, the one where you're almost asking them to confirm what you're saying is right. Just be very careful with those, because what they'll do is that they'll respond in a way that you want to hear. You'll move on, but it might not be absolutely everything. It's just a response to help you get an answer to the question. The multiple questions are the really dangerous ones. If you ask 3 questions in one sentence, people will pick the question they want to answer. You'll have a long conversation with the one they pick. They won't have answered the other 2. You'll be 3 questions further on before you realise they haven't answered the other 2 and you can't go back. So just be very careful about making sure 1 question per sentence, and then people have got 1 question to respond to, and then you can come on to your next question next time. We kind of think of it like a funnel. So start with the open questions, explore what it is you want to know about the service, probe to make sure you understand what's going on, test whether they've thought about the contingencies, and then use a closed question to confirm that you really understood what they've been trying to tell you. That's the best way of approaching the questioning that you want. Thinking about meeting etiquette, listen before you decide your response. So it's very easy to form a view in the first 3 sentences they've said. Wait till you've heard all of it. And really importantly, it's their story, not yours. So whilst they will want to hear about how you approach it in your service, you need to listen about their story first before you start talking about your service. Otherwise, you get caught up in a conversation that gets you nowhere. If there's several people in the room, we've talked about this on a previous slide, make sure everybody contributes, make sure you hear from everybody. And you should think about how you would manage people who won't stop talking. There's some people who don't know where a full stop comes in a sentence and will carry on forevermore. And I find it really helpful at the outset when you're introducing the meeting to say to people, we need to get some information on some of the measures. When we think we've got enough, we need to pause and move on so that we can get to the other measures and give those ample time and you chance to talk about the good practice there. So you already introduced the idea that you might stop them and move on fairly early on, so that when you do that, they go, oh, I knew that was coming, so that's fine, we'll move on. And it doesn't feel insulting. Look for reactions from people as you're talking to them to make sure they're staying engaged with you and they're talking to them. Watch for defensive behaviour of people who seem to be putting up protective screens. But also be aware of your own body language. We did a review once with a director of nursing who got a very reflective style, and she wasn't asking the questions, so she was looking out of the window as she was thinking about some of the things. Everybody else in the room thought she wasn't interested in just looking out the window, things going past. She was absolutely paying attention, but her body language said something different to the people who were there. So think about your body language, both on the camera if you're doing it virtually, but also as you're in the room with people. When you've finished your meeting, summarize the main issues. Give them the opportunity for further comments. So have we missed anything? Is there anything else you want to add? Anything you should tell us about? And make sure you ask them which is they're most proud of the service. Don't lose that opportunity in the meeting for them to talk about things that they're really proud of. But really importantly, that's going to take you 5 minutes. By the time you've summarized the main issues and by the time you've then said anything we've missed, anything you want to tell us about what you're most proud of, that's another 5 minutes. So if you've only got half an hour for an interview, make sure you wind up at 25 past so that you've got that final 5 minutes to do those last bits. Don't rush those, give them time. make sure you thank people for their time and openness. They've put a lot of effort into being at that meeting. They need to be recognised for the effort that they've put in. If they haven't really put it in, still thank them. Don't be sarcastic. Give them that opportunity to go away thinking that they've done something. And come back to the comment I said earlier on. If you've heard something that you're worried about, go and talk to somebody, share that. You will hear things that you might want to offload with somebody. So take that time to share that with other people. So in summary, be prepared, clear introductions to the conversations, use open questions to get people talking, active listening so that people think that you're paying attention, you can see you're paying attention, make sure your notes are good and clear, summarize what you've heard so that you both ensure that you've heard the right thing, give them a chance for further comments, and then thank them for what they've heard afterwards. So before we go on to the final bit about drawing conclusions and writing the report, does that make sense to everybody? Is everybody so far on page? Anybody want to pick anything up at this point? All right, okay, let's go through the last bits, and then once we've done it all, I think we probably then can start to see where we are. So we talked about terminology earlier on. This is the potato, potato, tomato, tomato bit about what we call things and how we refer to them. Whether we call them guidance, measures, standards, assessment, it kind of doesn't matter at this stage. There is a definition of something the service should be doing. They will provide you some evidence about where they think they are on those individual parts of that journey of meeting that measure. You will need to make an assessment with fresh eyes and impartial view about whether you think they're right. In my experience, people fall into two camps here. People fall into the really beat themselves up and really hard on themselves and say almost no to everything in the hope that you'll tell them what else they need to do to get it right. And some people are really hard on themselves, and you need to recognise that and find a way of helping them understand they're better than they think they are. But a lot of people, because it's their service and they're so used to it, look at part of the measure, see two words in the measure, say they're meeting that, and therefore put a yes that they're meeting it, but actually most of it is still unmet. So I think more often than not, you will find that people are less harsh on themselves, and you need to be very objective about helping them grow and understand what it is that they're doing. When you're drawing conclusions about whether they're meeting the measures, you need to think either it's a yes, they meet the measures, it's a no, they don't, or whether the measure is not applicable to that individual service. And we'll come on in a minute to getting you off the fence of the partially, because that doesn't exist. So if it's no, and they don't meet the measure, you need to put the real reasons why you think the measure was not met, where it is you think they are meeting the measure, and the bits that they don't. And we'll come on to how you might phrase that in a minute. If it's yes, and they are meeting the measure, do exactly the same as you've just done. Say why they're meeting the measure. That identifies the good practice. That allows you to draw out the things that are really good. So if you think they're meeting the measure, say so and explain it. The yes and the no are very much about the time of the visit. It's not about what they are going to do next week. It's not about what they might want to do in a month's time. It's on the day that you went, where they're meeting that measure, where all of the aspects of the measure met. So if the measure's got 3 or 4 points in it, it's really important that those 3 or 4 points are met to allow you to see the measure is being met. This is where we need to get you off the fence, because there's no partially met. They either did or they didn't. But you can, however, in the comments that you write, phrase a way of saying where they are on that journey. So if the standard is everybody has a cup of tea when they walk in through the door, you could say, no, they didn't have a cup of tea when they walked through the door, and there were no teacups in the cupboard and the kettle was cold. Or you could say, no, but actually the kettle was boiling, the teacups were on the side, but they got distracted and were not able to provide the tea when you walked through the door. But if you came another day, you might have seen something different. Again, you could say, yes, they made you a cup of tea and walked through the door, but actually it was the worst tasty cup of tea I've ever had, and the water was cold. Or you could say, yes, it was the best cup of tea I've ever had, and they provided chocolate biscuits as well. So those things you can put into the context of the yeses and the nos to allow the service to see the progress that they're making, and you recognised the things that they're doing. When you're looking at the policies, it is not your role to look about whether they've written a good policy and that's the wording you would use. it's only as far as the measure goes. So if the measure says there needs to be tea bags in the cupboards and cups in the cupboard, you might not like the patterns they've got on their cups, but that's got nothing to do with you. You want to make sure the cups are in the cupboard and the tea bags are in the tin. So it's that concept that you're trying to think of, whether you're looking at whether people are meeting the measures or whether they're not. When you're drawing conclusions, where you see something that's a major issue, so you might see something where clinical practice is not consistent with the service policy. So you may see the policy says do this, and actually clinicians are doing something very different. Make a note of it and make sure you record it as you go along, because you need to play that back to the team. In your notes, bullet points are fine. You do not need to have a real good prose and writing style. If you want to, that's great, but bullet points are good as you go through. Quantify wherever you can. So if you see something and there's a particular element to it, make sure you record that and understand it. If you can, try think of multiple sources to support what you've seen. So it's really important not to rely on one person, but if you do have to, make sure you recognize that in your report. And it's really important that you think about describing the situation, not the solution. So it's not your job to tell them what to do. You can help them in the conversation about what you think they might want to do, but actually you should describe the problem and the challenge that you've seen in the service. There are a couple of reasons why you don't describe the solution. One of them is that if you describe a solution that you think will work and they follow your advice and they implement it, and you go back in a year's time and they still have got the same problem, now it's your fault because you told them the answer to the problem and they've done it exactly as you told them to do, and it's still not working. The other thing is they need to own the answers to the solutions. They need to find a way that works for them and their service. It needs to belong to them, and people who own the answers to problems tend to implement them a lot better. Keep your notes so you can check, because you'll get the draft report coming through to check that it's your words. So please keep your notes to make sure that it reflects what you've seen. When you're thinking about your conclusions, quantify your comments, start to think about what it is that you're saying in terms of the describing the challenge for the service. So this is an example of a previous review we did somewhere else, or take it out of somebody else's, but it gives you an example. You know, you might say nursing staff levels were low for the number of patients and dependency of the unit. Kind of doesn't tell you much other than they haven't got enough nurses. But actually, if you say they were low for the number of dependency of patients and staffing was whatever it was in whole time equivalent for 16 beds, it should have been this, but it was that. And whilst they said that they reduced it overnight, the acuity of some patients, while it was lower, some patients actually needed more support overnight. So that concept of describing the problem and the challenge and not just a statement of where they're at. Start to think about how you write that in a way that helps the service understand from there how they can improve and what they could do better. So in our reports, we will think about issues in certain categories. We'll start the report with general comments and achievements. So comments about the progress of the service, the way the service is going, the way it's improved, the way it's grown over time, its vision for the future, etc. The things that you've seen in talking to people that you've gathered. The next thing we'll talk about is what we call immediate risks to clinical safety and clinical outcome. The chances of you finding one are really remote and really rare, and I hope to goodness none of you do, but in reviews we have found them from time to time, and they are easy to see. It's the hair on the back of your neck moments when you go, oh my God, I can't go home tonight without telling somebody about this because I'm really worried about this. So the chances in the reviews we're doing here of finding one of those are quite low. But if you do, there is a process for us to be able to escalate that very quickly to the medical director, the nurse director, and the chief executive, so the service can take appropriate action. Like I say, most often you won't, but if you do, you will recognise one when you see it. The next and really important thing to write is the good practice. We write the good practice first because by the time you've talked about some of the challenges the service have got and the things you're concerned about and the further considerations they can make, they'll be thinking too much about the future and they won't be listening to the good practice. So say what's good first. Then you talk about the concerns, you think the things that the service maybe hasn't seen, or maybe the service does know. I've fed back many times to chief executives stuff that we call concerns. They've said, we know about that. We just haven't managed to get around to sorting it. So don't be surprised that actually you're saying it and the service goes, I knew about that. Sometimes it's just about the capacity to be able to deal with it. And then there's things like the further considerations. So further considerations are not good, they're not bad. It's just the sort of thing that next time the service is thinking about making some changes, it's the sort of thing they may want to include. Advice from you, things you've done that actually they may want to consider. This is framed about for the person who's giving the feedback at the end of the day. So when you get to the end of the review, the people who are being reviewed have put an awful lot of personal and emotional capital into preparing for this review, almost bearing their soul in front of you, the things they're doing for their service. It's really important that at the end of the review, you give them some headline feedback, because if you don't, the rumour mill will fill the gap for you and that'll run away in the service. So it's really important that you frame the end of the review with some headline feedback for people. So explain the categorisation of issues so people know about the issues. If there are no immediate risks, tell them. It's really important that you don't skirt over it because there were none. Tell them that there were no immediate risk. It's not your job to say whether a service is safe or not, but you can say whether you have or haven't seen anything that really worries you. Try to avoid getting into detailed debate about the feedback. This is what you saw and you're playing back what you saw. You can give them a chance at the end to correct anything majorly factually inaccurate. Make sure your body language reflects what you're saying. So if you're talking about something that's worrying, don't smile. If you're talking about something that's really good, don't look glum, look happy because you're pleased that you're telling them some good stuff. Avoid mixing things up. So if you're talking about good practice, don't put any negativity in there. So save the negative bits for something else. Otherwise, it dilutes the good practice and it makes it seem trivial somehow. Make sure that you summarise only briefly. Do not go into the length of the report that you're going to write, but actually make sure you give the headline stuff. You keep a copy of the feedback that you've given them so that you can use that to help you frame and write your report. So when the review is over, you've given the feedback. What then happens then as a team of reviewers, you then write the draft report. So I think one person is going to write the first draft of the report. Everybody else is going to comment. It's really important that you read the draft report and make sure that your words are reflected in there and that what's in there is what you have seen and the evidence that you've seen. That's why you need to keep your notes. The report then goes to the host team for factual accuracy. This is not their opportunity to write the report they wish you'd have written. This is their opportunity to be able to make sure that you haven't misunderstood something and got something wrong in the report. The final report then gets agreed between you and the host team. And then that goes into, first of all, they then get the final report and can start to take some action. They've already started working on some of the things you've identified from the verbal feedback you gave them at the end of the review, but this gives them the whole structure to be able to work on some of the things that you've identified that they could be working on and improving. As we then get that together, we then get the opportunity to pull that together for that wider feedback. For everybody on this review, whether you're being the host team or the review team, make time to get something out of this. It's going to be a busy day or few days. Get that time for your own personal learning experience, to take away things that you can take away for you that says this will help me grow in my professional practice. Always remember that quality is a journey, not a destination. So no team will ever get there. They'll be on the way to getting there. And as we talked about earlier on, if they then stand still halfway on that journey, everybody will overtake them. So this is a process of improvement, and you can't ever assume that people will get to perfect. They'll get to good, and you'll be able to recognize some of that. So that is, I think, the things that we should have covered and we would want to cover. I can stop sharing now and come back into where we are. Right, so I'll send you those slides as soon as we've finished, and we get those over to you. Is there anything in there, apart from the fact your head is now buzzing with stuff and you're trying to see the wood for the trees and think it through, and you'll need to sit down and review the slides and need to think it through? Is there anything in there at the moment that doesn't quite hang, or something that people want to pick up or think about?
Also wanted to chat. Oh, Julie's got.
Go on, Julie.
I remember to do it this time. I think.
Well done.
No, I was just literally going to agree with you, Tim. My head is kind of exploding with information now. So I think I need to go and I think I hadn't had a chance to review Sahira's slides from Monday. So I think I need to do that. And I think then some of the points that you've made today would make even more sense. So I think at the moment I'm kind of thinking, my goodness,
Yeah.
and trying to figure it all out. Do we contact people in the other who? So I think Leicester are down to go and visit Stoke Trust. So do we contact them or do we wait for them to contact us?
I think it's I forget the terminology, but there's somebody there who's the organizer in each of the teams, and they will make contact. We're encouraging people not to do it until you've done the training, because that kind of helps flow some of that. But so, and then you will need to discuss the appropriate arrangements that work for you and your team. So in just thinking about how you might want to do it, and I'd encourage you not to make too many fixed agreements till you've gone back and talked to the rest of the team. Come back to Sarah's point about you doing the interviews back to back with patients, or you put some gap in between. You just need to think about people's capacity and headspace to be able to get through it. And don't forget, and I said this right at the start, so let's just go back and touch base with it. None of what I've told you is stuff you haven't already done. So you know how to have interviews with people, you know how to hold meetings with people, you know how to talk to them and get the best out of them, you know how to identify good practice when you see it, you know how to identify things that bother you when you see them, you know how to assess evidence against a particular standard or a measure or a quality. So there's nothing in here that you don't do day to day in your everyday practice. What we're doing is giving you a framework to be able to hang it together so you can see how that works in your individual in this individual review program. When you've done one, then it kind of makes a little more sense. So there is a view that the people who put their hand up to say I'm going to be reviewed first, I think that's Stoke in this case, that Tracy, is that you? Then the people who put their hand up to say I'm going to be reviewed first get a benefit of then seeing how that happens when they go to review somebody else. The people who are on the first review team take the learning back to say, actually, we're going to change our evidence slightly, or we're going to change that because maybe we've been a bit too generous here, or maybe we haven't put other things in that we should have done. I don't know. As the time goes on, the 11th service to get reviewed will have got all that learning, and you just need to think when we get to the end that the people who went first were the program setters, and you need to understand that they didn't have the benefit of everybody else's experience. So you just need to have a little bit of balance in there when we look at the reviews. What we don't want to do at the end is create an 11th service hierarchy. This is not about who's the best performing service in the Midlands and who's not. This is about, if you put it all onto a continuum, what you should find at the end of this is that everybody is good at something and everybody's probably struggling with something. And if you map them all together, you should be able to map the good to the people who are struggling, and everybody find a buddy. We did, and it's probably true for long COVID, we did a review of haemoglobin services across the country against the set of national standards that we wrote. And it's amazing how many clinicians are working only 40 miles from another set of clinicians who don't know who they are. And the first thing that those clinicians did when they walked into the service, shake your hand and say, here's my phone number. If you've got a problem, here I am. And it's the first time they'd met each other, even though they're doing the same service in the next town along. So this opportunity for clinicians, and I use the clinicians in the wider context of doctors, nurses, whoever, AHPs, I don't mind. But it's that people who work in a clinical environment to understand what's happening and to know somebody who's got the opportunity to help them out. So that phone a friend call happens then very often in haemoglobin services because now they know each other. And that's what you'll get out of this.
No, it's definitely exciting. It's very exciting. And I think, like you say, all of everything so far has been online. So we attend the national network meetings on a Monday, and essentially you don't see anybody's face. So yeah, it's going to be really lovely. Thank you.
I think it is, and I think the early ones are virtual because that's just the way it is. You might want to migrate some of them into a face-to-face. The problem is geography. Is that the people from Lincoln going to Shrewsbury and Shrewsbury going to Lincoln is just not going to happen. It's not going to work that way. So, but thinking about how you might want to think about the geography and the working of that, it's sometimes it's easier just to burn the candle at both ends and get up early in the day and get there.
But indeed, like even if it's virtual, you'll still see somebody's face. You know, when you're on some of these bigger meetings, you don't actually get to kind of look at someone and say, "Hi, this is
Of
me,
course,
this is my face," rather than
absolutely.
just someone's, you know, like the round with no face. It'll be good. It'll be good. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, thank you. Karen.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to say really to acknowledgement, well, to acknowledge and for perhaps everyone on the call to also acknowledge that our team is fully virtual. We don't actually meet with each other. So many of us in the team haven't met face to face anyway. So I think for us, face to face is going to be, you know, a very different concept because we don't do that between ourselves. So I just wanted that acknowledged really early on in the process, if possible.
If that's the way your service works, Karen, then that's the way the review happens, because that's the way you approach your patient consultations. That's the way you approach the clinical advice you give. So it would be wrong and inappropriate to review any differently than the way that you work. And so I think that's one of the reasons why some of the ones early on have been done virtual. And I think it's about that agreement you reach, because this isn't about when CQC do their reviews, as they're the regulator, it feels like they're coming to highlight bad practice and no matter how much they write the good stuff, it doesn't ever feel that way. That's not what this review is about. This review is about finding the things that could be better, and it's also about finding things that are really good. And so it's that opportunity to have that dialogue about pulling those good things out. You may find that some of the stuff that Sarah will get from the patient views will be very important and tell you an important story. We did a review of a service in the Midlands where a clinician was held in really high regard from their patients and felt they gave them a one-to-one individual personal service. And the patient said, when I get there, for the 10 minutes I get in front of them, it's really good. But actually, outside of that, I can't get hold of them. I can't talk to them. They're really nice. But actually, it's a very short interview and then it's over. And the clinician got no idea that patients are bubbling up stuff in between then. And it was only when our patient reps spoke to the patients, managed to package that in a way that the clinician could understand, did they change the way that they approach their interviews with patients. So it does bring things out that you tend to see that you're just too busy to see and couldn't understand. So I come back to what I said earlier on. You know where I am. You've got my contact details. If when you're preparing and you just want to check something out, drop me an email. I'm around most of the time. I'll probably be able to help out. So Sarah.
Yeah, I think that it was just on the back of that last point. I think, Karen, I think this is really probably quite can't remember, sorry, but my experience of being part of a long COVID clinic is all virtual. So I've never met virtual and often on the telephone. And I think what I'm going to have to be careful about is not bringing my bias around how I feel about that into the conversations that I'm having with patients. And that's probably true, isn't it, for all of us? And I only just thought about that when you were talking, Karen, because when we're very used to one way of doing something. Sorry, today isn't a good day. Sorry.
That's fine. Thanks, Sarah. I just wasn't sure if it was the case for all three of the areas, so that's why I've just put my hand up and said, that's how we've worked from the start and still are.
I think you're right.
No worries, Karen.
Yeah.
So I think what we've recommended is that both the host team and the review team meet in advance. So we've kind of said these are the things that you are recommended as part of a peer review, but really take a flexible approach to as to how you might undertake some of those activities that we've highlighted. And if that means you do it face to face or virtual, we're leaving that up to services to decide.
And I think just picking up on Sarah's point about what you're used to, what you're comfortable with, and we said it earlier on, it's really important again, is that This is about whether it meets the measure, whether it's the right way of doing it for that service. This isn't about the way you would do it if it was in your home service. This isn't about your individual approach. You need to take that step back as a clinician and say, is this right? Does this work for that patient group? And there's a balance, isn't it? Because not everything will work perfectly for everybody. But is it largely working for largely the patients it's serving? And are people aware of the shortfalls of the model they've got for the patients it's not helping? And are they trying to mitigate that? That's the conversations you need to be having and the feedback you need to give. So if it's entirely virtual, there will always be one or two people who say, I would have liked to have met face to face. And for those people, if the service recognises and understands that and either can or can't do anything about it is a different question. But if the service recognising that, or are they just ploughing on regardless, because that's the model they do and that's the way we do things around here. And it's that wider conversation about the way the service works, and you not bringing, as Sarah said, your own personal biases in about the way that you think. Right. Okay. So I think we've probably gone through as much as we can there at the moment. So let's draw it to a close. Like I said, we're around. Zahira, you got her contact details. You got my contact details. If you want anything, give me a shout. Probably as it settles in your head, I'm sure that there will be. I'll do my best to come back to you. Good luck, guys. I hope it goes well. We're running this session a couple more times. I think the 9th of May is the next one. You don't need to come to that one because you won't hear anything different. It'll be the same slides and the same conversation. So, you know, you've heard it. You don't need to come in. But good luck. I really hope it goes well. I hope it's a learning experience. I hope it's a positive experience for everybody, and I hope it really works well. Zahira.
Yeah, I just wanted to double check that everybody's got access to NHS Future. So you should have received an invite. Please do check your junk box as well, because that's where I think I did try it and I think it landed in the junk box instead. So please do check, and if you don't have an invite, then I'll try and resend it. But all the templates, all the guidance, we've also developed a guidance document, you know, and that's been developed in a collaborative way with different clinical leads across long COVID services, expert advice, etc. So that's more of a detailed guide. So if you've got some time, and it's an easy read, so if you've got some time, then I do recommend that you read through that document, and it kind of just goes into a little bit more detail compared to the slides that we've shared in advance. So yeah, I know you'll have some time. I know you'll probably need some time to kind of just really get your head into the process, the documents, etc. But if you do have any questions, require any support along the way, around the process, etc., I'm the person to kind of ask, or you can even ask Tim. You can contact me via email, or even call me. So hopefully that's useful.
Right. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
I'll let you go kettle on. You've got 7 minutes free time. That's really good. So enjoy it. Good to see you. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.